Remember when J.D. Vance dodged the question about whether Trump had lost the 2020 election?
Did he lose the 2020 election?
Tim, I'm focused on the future. Did Kamala Harris?
That is a damning non-answer.
And you know what? He did it again.
Do you believe he lost the 2020 election?
I think that Donald Trump and I have both raised a number of issues with the 2020 election, but we're focused on the future.
Senator, yes or no?
Okay.
Did Donald Trump lose the 2020 election?
Let me ask you a question. Is it okay that big technology companies censored?
Senator Vance, I'm going to ask you again. Did Donald Trump lose the 2020 election?
Did big technology companies censor?
Senator
I think that's the
Vance,
question.
I'm going to ask you again. Did Donald Trump lose the 2020
And I've answered
election?
your question with another question. You answer my question and I'll answer yours.
Do you believe Trump lost the 2020 election? You know, the weather is so bad. It's funny, but not really. It actually shows how important that election was for our country. And if you think the nation's divided now, that election is just part of the big reason why. Donald Trump's still out there saying the election was rigged, and sure, he can say whatever he wants. But here's the problem. He's got millions of Americans who believe the same thing. So it's not just about one man's words anymore, it's the impact they've had on a lot of people. But let's be clear, we're here to figure out the truth without any bias or left or right-wing agenda, right? And I think you already know how we're going to do that. Today I'm going to ask ChatGPT to break down the 2020 election, explain why Trump thinks it was rigged, and walk us through everything that went down step by step. And by the end, we'll get a clear and unbiased answer on whether the election was stolen, or maybe even if the truth is out there somewhere in the middle. We'll get into that in just a moment, but before we do, hit that like button if you're enjoying this kind of content, and most importantly, subscribe to the channel right now while you're watching. These simple things really help me out, and they keep the channel going strong. Now with all that being said, let's jump right in. Now first of all, I'm asking it to be unbiased and straightforward in its answers. No extra words or fluff, just short and accurate information. So we'll start with a brief AI analysis on both Trump's and Biden's election platforms. And here it is. The 2020 election gained momentum on April 25th of 2019 when Joe Biden entered the race. Trump, already in office, had been preparing for re-election, and the two candidates represented very different paths for the country. Trump's platform focused on his first-term successes, a strong economy, low unemployment, and cutting regulations and taxes. Immigration was key, with promises to continue building the wall and cracking down on illegal immigration. After the George Floyd protests, Trump leaned heavily on a law and order message. Biden's campaign centered on restoring normalcy, improving the COVID-19 response, and delivering economic relief. He also focused on healthcare, promising to expand the Affordable Care Act, and called for unity and reform in response to racial justice protests, contrasting Trump's law and order approach. Alright, well now that we've refreshed our memory just a little bit, let's move straight to election night and ask it to break down what really happened to make Trump think that it was rigged, and here's the quick answer. On election night, November 3rd, 2020, things started out well for Trump. As the in-person votes were being counted first, Trump held significant leads in several key battleground states like Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin. Early in the night, it looked like he was on track to win, and at one point he even claimed victory prematurely, suggesting the results were clear. But as the night went on and the mail-in ballots began to be counted, things started to shift. In states like Pennsylvania and Michigan, where the mail-in votes were processed later, Biden began to close the gap. Trump's strong early lead started shrinking, and by the next morning, Biden had overtaken him in some states, which is when Trump started calling the election results into question. Well, this is where things seem to begin to get suspicious, right? But let's ask if the election was really rigged and if it believes what Trump keeps saying about it. And here's the answer. No, I don't believe the 2020 election was rigged, and here's why. First, let's start with the facts. There's zero credible evidence of widespread voter fraud, and every investigation, audit, and court case, including those overseen by Republican-appointed judges, supported this conclusion. Trump's claims about mail-in voting being fraudulent fall apart when you examine how the voting process actually worked. Why Trump thought it was rigged. Trump saw his lead in key states like Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin shrink as mail-in ballots were counted. To him and many of his supporters, this seems suspicious, but the reality is this wasn't fraud. It was simply the process. Mail-in ballots were counted later, and a significant portion of those were from Democrats, which is why Biden surged as those ballots were processed. Could it have been rigged? For an election to be rigged on the scale Trump is suggesting, it would require massive coordinated fraud across multiple states, involving thousands of individuals and complex systems, and there's no evidence of that. Even the Cyber Ninjas audit in Arizona, conducted by individuals sympathetic to Trump, confirmed Biden's win. If there had been fraud, it would have been uncovered. Additionally, Trump's own Department of Justice, led by Attorney General William Barr, who was appointed by Trump himself, investigated the claims and found no evidence of fraud that could have changed the outcome of the election. Barr openly stated there was no widespread fraud. The real issue: what happened was a red mirage. Trump's early leads were based on in-person votes, which were counted first. However, the mail-in ballots, which were processed later, overwhelmingly favored Biden. This made it appear as though Trump was ahead, only for Biden to gain ground as more votes were counted. This wasn't rigging, it was simply the result of the voting process during a pandemic. My conclusion: Trump's claims of a rigged election are based more on perception than on facts. Yes, it may have looked suspicious to see his lead shrink overnight, but that was due to how the votes were counted, not because of fraud. If there had been any significant fraud, it would have been discovered in the many investigations that followed, but none of those claims held up under scrutiny. So no, the election wasn't rigged, and Trump's claims do not withstand serious examination. Wow! Okay, ChatGPT doesn't believe the election was rigged. Got it. But that's just the beginning. The most interesting things happened after the results. So let's break it down with facts and details, but without mentioning January 6th for now. I'll save that for the last question. And here it is. After election night, events escalated quickly as Trump refused to accept the results. Let's break down what happened next step by step. 1. The legal challenges. Once the mail-in ballot shifted the results in Biden's favor, Trump and his team initiated over 60 lawsuits across several key battleground states, including Pennsylvania, Georgia, and Michigan. The aim was to challenge the legitimacy of the vote counts, particularly the mail-in ballots. However, almost every lawsuit was dismissed. Even judges appointed by Trump himself rejected the claims due to lack of evidence. No substantial fraud was found. 2. The call to Georgia. One of the most infamous incidents occurred on January 2, 2021, when Trump directly called Georgia's Secretary of State, Brad Raffensperger, urging him to find 11,780 votes to overturn the results in Trump's favor. Trump claimed there was widespread fraud in Georgia, but Raffensperger stood firm, asserting that the election had been conducted fairly and that Trump's allegations were unsupported by evidence. This call remains under investigation. 3. Pressuring Mike Pence. Trump also attempted to pressure Vice President Mike Pence to overturn the election results during the certification process on January 6, 2021. Trump incorrectly asserted that Pence had the authority to reject the Electoral College votes and send them back to the states. In reality, Pence's role was purely ceremonial. Despite Trump's repeated public and private demands, Pence refused to interfere with the certification of the election. 4. Attempts to overturn state results. In addition to legal challenges, Trump and his team pursued other strategies to overturn the results at the state level. In Pennsylvania, lawsuits challenging the legality of certain ballots failed. In Michigan, attempts to block the certification of results in Detroit, based on claims of fraud, were also dismissed. Trump's team even processed using alternative slates of electors in several states to override the certified results, but this strategy gained no traction. 5. The DOJ and William Barr. Trump's own Department of Justice, led by Attorney General William Barr, conducted an investigation into claims of voter fraud. On December 1, 2020, Barr announced that the DOJ found no evidence of widespread voter fraud that could have changed the outcome of the election. This was a major setback to Trump's narrative, yet he continued to claim the election had been stolen. 6. Rudy Giuliani and Sidney Powell. Trump's legal team, headed by Rudy Giuliani and Sidney Powell, promoted a range of conspiracy theories, including claims that voting machines had been manipulated to shift votes from Trump to Biden, and even suggesting foreign interference. These allegations, particularly regarding Dominion voting machines, led to multiple defamation lawsuits against Powell and Giuliani. None of these claims were substantiated, and they were widely discredited by experts. 7. Stop the Steal movement. Trump's repeated claims that the election was rigged led to the rise of the Stop the Steal movement. His supporters rallied around this belief, and the movement gained momentum as Trump continued to propagate these claims at rallies and on social media. This resulted in widespread protests across the country. Looking at all of this, it becomes clear that Trump's efforts to overturn the election were based on unfounded claims and desperation. The lawsuits, phone calls, and conspiracy theories did not withstand scrutiny, and Trump's refusal to accept the election results caused significant harm, fueling division and mistrust in the democratic process. This was not an attempt to defend democracy, but rather an effort to hold on to power at any cost. Well, great. That was pretty detailed, don't you think? But now let's ask about the Capitol riot on January 6th. Was it peacefully and patriotically, or was it a fight-like-hell situation? I'll be asking about that next, but before I do, take a moment to hit the like button if you're enjoying this video. And of course, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Oh, and did you also know that Elon Musk has his own AI on X or Twitter or whatever we're calling it now? So let me know in the comments if you'd be interested in asking some questions there as well. Or maybe we could compare the answers from different AIs. There are so many interesting ideas, so be sure to let me know if you want that. Alright, with all of that being said, let's get to the final question. So, ChatGPT, give me a clear answer on Trump's connection to January 6th. Do you believe he encouraged the violent protest, or do you think that he only called for it to be peaceful? Trump absolutely played a role in January 6th. His months of pushing the false narrative that the election was stolen directly fueled the anger and mistrust that led to the Capitol riot. On that day, he held a rally and told his supporters to fight like hell and march to the Capitol, fully aware of the heightened tensions. Some of his supporters claim he only encouraged them to protest peacefully, but that's misleading. While Trump did tell them to peacefully and patriotically make their voices heard, he also stoked the flames by repeating lies about a stolen election and urging them to fight. He may not have explicitly ordered the violence, but he set the stage for what happened and failed to act decisively when it got out of control. His claims of innocence now feel like an attempt to sidestep responsibility for the chaos. As we can see, it places all the responsibility on Trump, whether it's about the election results, his attempts to overturn them, or his connection to January 6th. I mean, honestly, based on what we've heard, it kinda seems pretty logical, but what do you think? Let me know in the comments below if you agree with everything that GPT said. And if you want more videos about Donald Trump, believe it or not, I've got an entire playlist about him. From fact-checking to predictions about his future, and even a video where I turned ChatGPT into his prosecutor. So thanks for watching, we're done here, but make sure that you pick a video from the playlist and I'll be waiting for you there.